How are we doing today? Welcome back. Welcome back. You know what time it is. This is the Light After Trauma podcast. I am your host, Alyssa Scolari. Welcome to another episode. We have a special guest with us who has been on the podcast before. You all love him. I love him. He is the greatest. It is Drew Assini. He was on one of the earlier episodes. We talked about, I believe the title was like remembering what we seem to have forgotten, it's an awesome episode. If you haven't listened to it, make sure you go check it out. And he's back because why wouldn't we have him back? He is amazing. So like I was saying, we are kind of catching up with Drew. I guess it's maybe been like six or 7 months since we recorded the episode. And the last time we talked with him, he was in Thailand, right? You were, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
he was somewhere. Pretty sure it was Thailand. And, we talked about a lot of good stuff. So, in terms of what we're talking about today, we don't have a specific plan because that's just how we roll. When guests sign up to be on the podcast, there's always like a little note where it's like, please share anything that you feel will help prepare for our meeting. And the one thing that Drew shared was 3 words: buckle your seatbelt. And I have done so. I have done so. And I am ready. So we have with us guide, facilitator, fellow traveler on this wild ride called life, Drew Assini. Hello.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Yeah, thanks. It's an honor.
So you're in Jersey now.
Yes. Yeah, I think the last time we spoke, I was in Thailand. And then I spent about the last 6 months in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA.
That's right. I saw on Facebook that you were in Nashville, which is actually one of my favorite places to be. What made your decision to go from Thailand to Nashville?
So I connected with some folks there in Nashville who were doing, I want to call it more like healing than counseling or treatment, but it was like a treatment organization that had multiple levels of care, but the focus was on a much broader, holistic and comprehensive approach to healing and working at like the root level, and also working experientially as much as just talk therapy. So I don't know. I've struggled with what the heck I am or who I am, what my role is. And it kind of stepped out of the formal clinical counseling space. But then this was like an opportunity to step back in, but to remain kind of true to how I'm understanding healing and awakening and be able to work. Yeah, to be able to work kind of at that fringe or at that connection. And it was really cool.
Yeah, because I know when we talked last time, like on the episode we did a couple months ago, you were actually just getting ready to let your license expire. Your license to be a clinician. But, in a way, you've become an expert on things that are different types of healing, I think, rather than your traditional like talk therapy.
Yeah, I'm always tentative with that expert word, because once we think we know stuff, we get a little weird. But
right.
Yeah.
Right. Not in the sense that you're like, oh, I'm Drew and I know everything about, holistic healing, like not that type of expert, but this is just your wheelhouse. Like,
okay. Yeah, that feels good.
In all the years that I've known you, it just kind of feels like this is where you thrive. I think you fit into the healing world and the healing process, but not into the like clinician, like that maybe just like isn't your jive. Like you kind of go where life takes you.
Yeah. Which is, at times beautiful and, freedom, and at other times completely terrifying, and and you don't know what's next.
Yeah. Do you get terrified? Because I'm just going to add a little side note here. So I talked to my therapist about you and the work that you do. Just for the listeners out there was like one time, and I want to say it was maybe like a month or two after we recorded the first podcast, that I reached out to Drew and I asked him a question about some shit that I was dealing with one of my clients that I was kind of like bugging out about. And one of the things that he said to me was like, that honestly was really, I think, life-changing for me, was to like, don't get lost in the chaos. And I think that's a perfect, like, that is who you are. You are somebody who I think exists and brings so much healing just by being, but you do not get lost in the chaos of like the world and other people. I don't know. Does it feel like that for you?
No.
No.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
How does it feel for you? Because when you said that to me, and there were a couple other things that you said to me, it hit me really, really hard. And it has truly fundamentally changed the way that some of the ways that I operate in my practice. I have much less stress. I'm much more laid back. And I like just exactly what you said. Like, I don't get lost in the chaos. I stand outside of it. Or even if there is like a hurricane, right? If I am dealing with a case where there feels like a hurricane, or even a hurricane in my own life, I try to step into the eye of that hurricane, right? Where everything is calm and peaceful, which I don't know if I would have done if you didn't really give me that like reality check of like, you're in the chaos right now. Like, come back down. I don't even know if you remember us having a conversation about that.
No, yeah, I remember us connecting and chatting. Yeah, that's beautiful. That's awesome, babe.
It truly was altering for me on a personal and professional level. But you don't see yourself like that. You feel like you're in the chaos.
I mean, I think it's just it's hard to see ourselves, I guess, the way other people see us sometimes. And yeah, there's definitely periods of time where I have less internal noise and less stories and dramas and Drew flavored shenanigans. And then there's other times, yeah, where, like sort of kind of right now, actually, as I'm back home visiting family members in New Jersey. Yeah, there's just a lot more invitations to chaos and drama, that show up. And yeah, I feel like they're always there. It's just, do we have the calm or the perspective or the discipline to be able to resist what feels like a tasty little morsel, but really turns into like a whole shit show? And that just comes with some pain and some wisdom and some experience too.
It's like trial and error type of shit.
100%. Yeah.
So how is it for you? And if I'm asking too much, of course, tell me to back off. But like, what is it like for you to be kind of traveling and out and about on your own and having all of these incredible experiences? But is going home kind of like walking back in? Like, are there lots of like flashbacks? Like, what is your experience being back home?
It's weird. I feel like to a certain degree, I kind of stepped out of my immediate family system a couple years back, and and that was terrifying. And I had a million reasons why I shouldn't, but it was just kind of like my heart and my gut were like moving, and I went with it. And so then to come back and spend a little bit of time here, and by a little bit, I mean like 9 days. Like that's it.
You're only there for 9 days.
Yeah. The last time I came home was for 5 days, and now this time it's 9, and we'll see how that works. Because I'm just not the same dude or the same being or the same whatever that used to fit into this family system, into this dynamic. And so now I'm home and I get to visit with my mom and my dad and my sister and her family and the little nuggets, niece and nephews. But it's weird because the system has like re-regulated a little bit with me not as like a main character. It's like they rewrote the story and I'm no longer, a starring role, which, comes with a variety of feelings. It's a little sad, but it's also, it's also what I've come to discover is I'll take the peace and the ease that I have as whatever I am on a regular basis over the concessions that I was making on a regular basis to be a part of a family system where I couldn't show up fully, so I'm all right with it, but there's feelings there.
Yeah. And this is honestly coming off the heels of, although I guess it's not even coming off the heels, but after kind of an interaction with some of my own family members a while back, like this is resonating with me very, very, very deeply. Like as you're speaking, I'm like, I got that feeling going in my gut. And I'm like, oh shit, I know exactly what he's talking about. So, but I think it's important. I actually think this is a really, really painful but important thing to talk about when it comes to, especially complex PTSD and interactions with family members. So what I hear you saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't know if I'm projecting, but it's like, you're not that same guy that fit into that role to be able to continue the dysfunctional system, right? You've changed. And when you changed, you stepped away, right? You removed yourself from the dysfunction. So the whole system, right? The system's either it's going to change for the worse, for the better, differently, but you're not in it. And what I hear is that your system, the family system, has shifted so that you're not as much a part of it, which is, I think the situation for a lot of people. Am I understanding that correctly?
Yeah. Yeah. I like how you said it.
I feel that way so strongly with a lot of my family members, where now that I have changed so much, and I'm no longer perpetuating the dysfunction, right? I've removed myself from the dysfunction. I removed myself from the gossip, the this, the that, the he said, she said, drama, etc. When I come back, right, and I experience when I'm in a setting with my family, I'm very clearly written out, which is sad. It's very, very sad. But I love what you said about like the peace that I get from not being a part of that on a daily basis. I will choose that over the discomfort I get from like a temporary interaction in which it's very, very obvious to me that I don't belong.
Yeah. If it feels like I now get to star in a different TV show, and this one's cooler, and this one feels more like the role or the character I would like to play. Yeah.
How are you dealing with like because it is better, but it still brings up terrible feelings. How do you deal with that? Because I struggle with that too. Like, I struggle with that too. There are things that I have witnessed in the last couple months, and I'm just like, yeah, no, this clearly is not my path anymore.
Yeah. I mean, I think in general, healing has at its core, or could have at its core, a reworking of the relationship with feelings in general. Right. So, the last 6 months in Nashville, I was working, with folks. And at a core of that work was like, listen, we have to normalize all the feelings and we got to get used to feeling all of them. Right. Because as long as we play the game of like, I want these feelings, but not those feelings, we're at the mercy of a lot of the stories we make up around certain feelings or certain situations. So I think through, mindfulness and meditation and yoga and community and, a lot of the things that are a part of my regular experience now, a wider variety of emotions are okay. And so then I'm able to step into different situations or more challenging situations and the feelings that come with that. And it's never like one feeling, it's like this like weird, like, combo. Like
Fucking
the image
web of emotions.
Well, the thing I'm seeing is, the movie Inside Out.
Yes.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Right. So in the beginning of that movie, there's all the like different colored emotions, but by the end, right, they're having like multiple colors in one memory. Right. So it's like this,
right. The marbles, right? So the marbles signify the memory. And like by the end, you have more marbles that are like blended, right? Dual colors, triple colors. Then you have marbles that are just solid.
Yep. And so like, as we mature, as we develop, ideally we're having experiences that we're able to acknowledge have multiple facets to it, multiple feelings to it. Yeah. And so like today at 40 versus me at 30 versus me at 20 versus, prior versions of me, I'm more cool or more okay with a wider variety of those combinations and those flavors. And that then, the way I understand it, that directly translates into my ability to have peace in the present with whatever might show up.
Yes, because you're allowing space for all of it to exist.
Yeah.
And I think
cool.
Like that's what I hear, right? Is that I'm making space for, by not just saying, well, this is all good, right? This is all bad, or this is all right. If we're going with the Inside Out, like, right, we're gonna make this marble blue because this is all just sadness. It's like, no, it's very complex, right? Hence complex trauma. It's very complex, and there's space for all of it. And I think that's when you allow yourself to have space for all of it is what helps the most with managing it. Like, I don't know. Am I making sense? I'm trying to think of an example. Like,
and when we say, when we say it, we mean like life and all of the life happenings.
All the life happenings. And I think it especially rings true for any kind of trauma survivors who struggle with family stuff. It's like, well, my family has X, Y, and Z toxic trait, and they did X, Y, and Z, but I can't. And people struggle over like, I can't just cut them off and say that they're dead to me. And it's like, no, you don't have to do that. You know, it's okay for all of that to exist.
Like I worked with folks recently where it's like, okay, my specific parent, right, is responsible for some of the trauma, for some of the abuse, but also like I love them. And it's like, how do both of those things show up? Like that's hard. Yeah.
That's where it gets fucking complex. Oh, it's like, yes, I have a parent or this family member or this person who was directly responsible for, even like for me, right? Like eating disordered stuff, like part of like what contributed to my like eating disorder shit was just watching every single person in my family talk about how fat they were, talk about how disgusted they were with themselves, be on diet after diet after diet, so I know, right, that part of where my eating disorder stuff comes from is directly related to some of my family members. But damn, I still love them.
Mm-hmm.
That's where it's so hard. It's so hard.
Well, and can that just be okay? Do we have to do something about that? Or can that be something that we're able to like sit with and notice and feel into? And it's hard. That space is that space. I mean, that's also the space where beautiful changes and transformations happen.
That is the space, right, where the magic happens, so to speak. That's the space that I think most people have a lot of trouble. Most people are like, well, I know my dad did this, but I still love him, but I can't. And people are tormented by it. They are tormented by having the black and white thinking is what torments us. It's like, well, how I still love him, but he did all this stuff to me, but I still love him. And so many hours of torture and torment and pain and suffering, I think, could be saved if we were able to tolerate space for all of it and let it all be true and let it all be okay.
Yeah. And I think it's like related. It's important to acknowledge that part of the brain and the nervous system, the threat assessment system, whatever you want to call it, is all about like safe or not safe, danger, not danger. So there's this push towards categories and defining that's a part of us that actually probably saves our ass on a lot of situations. But right, if we get a little bit deeper into our healing process and we start to see what's actually present within us, there's another faculty, right? There's another, paintbrush in the set that can allow us to just be with something and feel, as opposed to like name and categorize, try to make the rights and wrongs. There's a more spacious, softer seeing that can become available, which is really instrumental in I would offer into healing and changing and awakening and letting stuff go and stepping into something new.
Yeah, I think you make a good point that our brains we truly are wired at times to see things in black and white, safe or not safe, in danger, not in danger. So it's kind of like having to separate out, like, there are going to be some times where the black and white thinking is necessary, but I think in this situation, it can be kind of prolonging our suffering.
Totally.
So what day are you on being at home?
I just spent the weekend, I don't know, 4 maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where are you headed after this?
So after this, next stop is Guatemala. I'm going to go hang out in, I think it's central Guatemala. There's a really cool lake and the culture and some towns around the lake there, Lake Atitlan. So I'll go hang out there next.
How long will you be there for?
I don't know. I'm committed. I bought a one-way ticket and I'm committed for like a month. And then, I don't know. We'll see.
Have you ever been to Guatemala before?
Nope.
So, all right. I've got to ask you this. How do you decide where you're going next? Like, do you do one of those like maps, dartboard, boom, wherever the dart lands?
No, it's, so like when I was in Thailand, I was staying the second half of my time in Thailand, I was staying on an island that had kind of a spiritual vibe to it, or at least the one side of the island did. And so when Thailand was doing weird stuff as far as what would happen with Corona and people staying, people going, then I started looking for other spots. And then this was one of those places on the interwebs that people said had a similar vibe to where I was in Thailand. So yeah, I prefer personally to live in places where the wavelength isn't the 2021 modern capitalist materialist kind of American flavor. So here in places like this, and it can get a little lofty, because some people go to spirituality as like escapism and avoidism and all that. But for the most part, there's a little bit of a different wavelength that's available as a baseline, which I find more agreeable for, just my own daily experience. So, yeah, I mean, I'm from Jersey, so there's a certain stink and funk that, I don't know that I'll ever shake.
Yep.
But I don't have to stay in Jersey. I have learned. So.
Yeah. And you haven't. You've been traveling around for how many years has it been now?
A couple of years. I went out to Oregon and taught for a little bit, and then that turned into the RV and the drive about stuff, and then that led to Thailand for a bit, and then to Nashville, and now to Guatemala. So
now, because you said this earlier, and I want to come back to it, like I can't remember exactly what you said, but almost like I'm kind of struggling with like where I kind of fit into the whole like healing thing. Can you expand more on that? Like, is there some like residual like feelings about like letting your license expire and stuff like that?
Well, no. So I let my letters go when I started the drive about and then went to Thailand, because it felt like the clinical counselor therapist paradigm is cool and is, totally the exact lane or approach for a lot of folks. And I think that there's going to be a lot of people after this summer of fun ends and everyone gets back in touch with their corona arisen issues.
Yep.
There's going to be huge demand for counseling and therapy. And I think that's beautiful. Folks should feel super comfortable leaning into that. For me personally, the way I move and kind of how I understand stuff, I'm super grateful that I learned the CBT counseling clinical approach. I feel like that's a tool in my belt, but that I want to say bigger than that, but just my understanding is maybe different, or I guess I would say like wider, to include perspectives that are not just mental health America 2021.
Yeah, I think your spectrum of healing is wider than what mainstream like American counseling would even allow for, right? There are some types of, I think it sounds like lots of the types of healing that you feel the most connected to or the most aligned with is more based on Eastern philosophies.
It's that would be one way to say it. The more this opens up, like the perspective isn't, let's see, how do we say this? The perspective that I feel like I'm moving from isn't limited to any culture at any time and place. It's just a certain way of like seeing ourselves and understanding the world and moving in it. But yeah, I definitely got introduced to this as much through Eastern spirituality and wisdom traditions and native traditions and practices as anything else. Yeah, totally.
And I love that because I often feel, I think as a therapist, having to abide by, and I don't just abide by certain rules because it's what I'm supposed to, right? For the listeners out there, like there are certain things I have to abide by because I could lose my license, but I am very much interested in like the broader spectrum of healing that other countries are incorporating and using. And I think it is very frustrating to be a clinician in this country. I don't know about other countries, but it can be frustrating because we're very limited in what we can offer due to ethical boundaries and risks and liabilities and all that stuff that, we have a whole fucking smorgasbord of things we can't do or say. And if we sneeze the wrong way, we could be in trouble.
Which I think is super like cool and appropriate and helpful for a particular approach to health and well-being and treating symptoms and having a functioning life. So like that stuff's cool, but I've come to my own understanding where it's like, oh, normal in our society is really like symptom management and it's not healthy. And so I'm not interested in playing a certain role according to a bunch of imposed limits and restrictions to help people just like function better in a society that I think is kind of lost and a little sideways. Like I would rather help beings awaken from their own BS and their own stories and their own traumas, and then learn how to honor and walk in a way that honors themselves and their own truth or their heart. And that's, yeah, that's not usually on the, the disclosure statement or the consent statement when you first start, your 8 sessions of insurance paid for counseling.
Right. Right. A lot of it is symptom management. You are much interested in the deeper, fullest aspect of the human experience that you can get your hands on.
Right. It feels more like, I use the word healing a lot because I feel like that's a nice, that's close to what we do with counseling, but not always. Healing. And then for me, it's also like awakening, or sometimes I'll say like spiritual awakening. But I mean, I don't know. Sometimes I think spiritual awakening is a little weird because if we just awaken, we'll realize what we are and the words don't matter as much. So then spiritual awakening is then people like go chase, like I need to have dreadlocks and be a hippie and not shower. And it's like, no, bro, that's not what this is.
You got it wrong.
Yeah. Come back. So yeah, I like awakening, healing. And then I feel like my role in that is just guiding and supporting folks in their own recognition and then their own development of an ability to move from a place that's like less chaos, and a little more peace. So
yeah, that's what it is. It's less chaos, more peace. And that's something you've always been about. I know we haven't talked about it on this episode, but for the listeners out there, as a reminder, I met Drew when I was in grad school, and he was you were a part-time faculty member?
3/4 time, whatever that means. I had an office, so I felt, and they put my name on the wall, so I felt important.
What the hell is a 3/4 time faculty member?
That's what academia does when they don't want to pay for full,
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. We're not going to give you the full package, but we'll make you a 3/4 of a faculty member.
Well, but I never would have been able to serve like that if it wasn't for that position, right? Because I only have my master's degree, and in order to be the full-time professor, I mean, you can get an instructor gig with a master's, but I don't know. I also feel like super blessed that weird position was there, because then it allowed me to hang out in that space with those folks and gain those experiences and that wisdom. But
and so many of those folks, myself included, being in like the most stressful time of their lives. You get to grad school, and I feel like the first thing anybody does in grad school is they try to prove how difficult it's going to be, because they try to weed out the weak ones. Right. So they're like, if you came here to make money, to think you're going to get a job where you make money, drop out. If you think you're going to coast, drop out. If you think you might get a cold in 6 months, drop out. It's like the scare tactic. And then you've got Drew, who's like, I have a meditation place right down the street. And we were all like, yeah, let's go find Drew.
Yeah. It was a challenge trying to fit into that culture.
It's very cutthroat. Very cutthroat.
Well, my struggle with it is that academia a lot of times is a lot of folks who have never actually, we'll say, worked in the real world, right? So they're like folks that have been in school their whole life. So they just went to school to go to school to go to school to then teach school. And I don't know. I don't feel like you should have to work for tips at some point in your life, or like do some actual service work for like minimum wage at some point, or
right, that actually teaches you more about the human experience than I think a lot of just researchers can. Not to say that researchers are not brilliant and we've learned so much from them, but it's that culture is right. It's like you work and work and work to then teach, but you don't actually, like, what you're studying are humans, but in none of that time are you getting experience with humans.
Right. Yes, that's the potential. Not everybody's like that, but there is that. Yeah, there is that potential. Yeah, it's a very heady. It can be very heady and not a lot of hearty. Which, I mean, it's funny because that's like kind of what happens with trauma too, right? Is that we go to our heads to live there to be more safe than in the feels or the emotion.
Yeah, even grad school, you got to turn off your feelings, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, we're going to teach you how to help people get in touch with themselves. In order to learn this, though, you have to turn off your own feelings to succeed.
Because we're about to rip you to shreds.
Right. It makes no sense. None.
No. All righty. And I think we are going to stop there for this week. Drew and I had a pretty extensive conversation, so I thought it might be helpful to break it up into 2 parts, similar to what I did with the Rebecca episode. So we're going to wrap up there because we change topics for next week, and next week is just as important. I love having Drew on the show, so please go check out his podcast. He actually just launched season 4 of the Drive About podcast, or at least I believe the first half of it. So go check that out. It is the Drive About podcast, and then we will pick back up with this awesome discussion next week. Have a great week, everybody. Thanks for listening, everyone. For more information, please head over to lightaftertrauma.com, or you can also follow us on social media. On Instagram, we are at lightaftertrauma, and on Twitter, it is at lightafterpod. Lastly, please head over to patreon.com/lightaftertrauma to support our show. We are asking for $5 a month, which is the equivalent to a cup of coffee at Starbucks. So please head on over again. That's patreon.com/lightaftertrauma. Thank you, and we appreciate your support.